Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, best-selling author, comic creator, and now video game designer, Josh Grant. And it's so great to have you all on here. If you are joining us live, we love having you. We love being interactive on this show. So if you are joining us live, over there in the live chat, you can type in questions or comments for our special guest today. We'd like to put him in the hot seat, ask him the tough questions, right? If you're joining us later, you're welcome to throw those questions down there in the comments below. I love to share those with some of our guests. Throw those questions and comments down there. If you have no idea what this is and stumbled upon it, this is Diabolic Shrimp. It's connected to Diabolic Shrimp, the website. We love to interview interesting and famous people from around the world, get their perspectives on things. And so if you want to join us in that journey, hit the like, ding that bell for noties. I guess there's a million buttons down there. So just, smash all those buttons, make them burn. So, but our special guest today is Prentis Rollins. Prentis has all this exciting work, just a vast body of work. This amazing artist. I definitely wanted to tell you, go check out some of his art. Find him on Instagram. Down below in the description below, there's links to his books and to his website. Just beautiful art and just an amazing comic book artist and art of different kinds. And so we're going to talk all about comics today. But before we get there, I just want to show three of our highlighted books today. So first off, Spontanea by Carl Paolino, another comic book, another best-selling comic book. I've read it, I've reviewed it. It's a really awesome book, but he's really kind and he's giving away free signed copies, a couple of them, to anyone that kind of comments. I interviewed him about almost a month ago now. So if you look back on the channel, you have to click on the live button for whatever reason on my channel, and you'll find all the videos there. Find Carl Paolino's video, comment on that video, and you'll be entered into the drawing for a live for a signed copy, excuse me, of his comic book, which is really awesome. It's a really awesome book too. It's a very Spider-Man-esque, and so definitely check it out. You can learn all about it on that one. So our next highlighted book here is Tesoro by Andrea Hintz, Secrets of the Hidden Treasure. Treasure hunters, a teenage pirate, an unending intrigue in this young adult series that contains fun for the whole family. After being told by her favorite college professor that she never takes enough risks, Daphne Blow, sorry, I'm mispronouncing that, decides to take a leap of faith by spending her summer traveling the world with her cousin, estranged uncle, and potential love interest. Also a great series, wonderful author. She's topped the charts. Actually, she was in England there for she did music. She did a cover for the Beatles. And then over here, our last highlighted book for the day before we get into Prentis Rollins here, Akia, the Akia series. So Elizabeth Jade, an author with autism, teaches the importance of friendship, acceptance, and equality through the eyes of the animals in a style likened to Jack London's Call of the Wild. These husky/wolf stories make the perfect gift for 7 to 11-year-olds and animal lovers of all ages. And once again, I've reviewed that one. For those of you that don't know, I'm a professional reviewer. Check out my stuff on Diabolic Shrimp, the website. This is attached to. But yes, also a great book, especially if you love dogs. And so now let's get to Prentis Rollins, our special guest. Again, worked with DC, worked with Marvel, still does some stuff with them, has his own books, How to Draw. Andrea Hintz, by the way, thanks for commenting there. Andrea, you are always so supportive of other people. Go support Andrea. She has a wonderful books. She has an amazing audiobook coming up. You'll see her on the show in a couple of weeks here. And so, but on to Prentis Rollins here. Just a bit about him before I bring him on. Prentis Rollins was born in North Carolina, grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and studied philosophy at the University of Southern California in Rutgers and New Jersey. Since 1993, he has worked for DC Comics on such titles as Green Lantern Rebirth, DC 1 Million, Impulse, and Batman the Ultimate Evil. And as if that's not enough, he's worked in Marvel Comics on New X-Men, Milestone Media, Hardware Static, Disney television animation, and get this PB&J and Otter, Doug's first movie, and 101 Dalmatians, and many others. His debut graphic novel, The Furnace, was published by Tor Books in July of 2018. His lifelong obsessions are philosophy, science fiction, and the strange territory in which these two things meet. He lives in London with his wife and 3 children. Now, poor Prentis has been waiting in the wings for like forever by this point. And so let's bring him on. Prentis, welcome
Hi,
to
Josh.
Diabolic Shrimp.
Thank you.
It
Thanks
is
for having me.
so great to have you on this show. I was just blown away by you know, I mean, I love DC. I love Batman. I love Marvel. I saw your drawing of like Wolverine recently, and so but your art all around is just incredible. So I can't wait to just talk art with you because I'm a comic book nerd. So so
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's great. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you. So Prentice, I think a great way to introduce people though is through a bit of show and tell. So did you happen to bring us anything for show and tell?
Yes, indeed, I did. It's this unassuming black book, which is of tremendous sentimental value to me because it is a sketchbook from 1977. And it contains the very first comics that I ever drew in my life.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, well, and how this happened was I was in the 5th grade, and this kid named Greg French, God rest his soul, he died young during COVID. He brought in one of these, and it was full of his comics, and I was just blown away. And so for like 2 weeks, I begged my mother to get me one of these. I knew where they were. They were at they were like at Sears, you know, at a mall nearby. And finally she brought one home and I started drawing comics. And here, I'll kind of hold it up. I hope that's the title. Is that kind of showing up? That's Disaster on the Oriental Express.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Is the title of the very first story.
Is it? I'm guessing it's connected to the classic novel, right?
No, I don't know. I was probably watching. So this is the very first page of comics that I ever drew, and I probably saw a commercial for Murder on the Orient Express and like the title. And so anyway, it's basically I had the idea for drawing a story about a plane and a train that collide, and that's pretty much what it is. But the most interesting thing in here is the second story in here is called The Depths of the Deep, and it was basically a mashup of Jaws, The Deep, and it was just about Godzilla. It's about a monster that comes out of the ocean and he's like destroying cities. Anyway, the story abruptly ends with this. It says up there, to make a long story short, the monster returned to the sea and was never seen again. Why does the story... Well, it's because if you turn the page, a movie had come out called Star Wars, and this is the first page of Star Wars 2 from the Adventures of...
yes. I feel like we should just read Star Wars 2 on this show instead.
Anyway,
I'm very curious to see what your sequel to Star Wars.
It's just basically, it just goes on and on. It's just like 50 pages of lightsaber battles and TIE fighters and X-Wings blowing each other up. But so that's the Star Wars sequel that preceded The Empire Strikes Back by 2 years.
I love this so much. I was like, I'm definitely connected because I'm working on a Star Wars fan comic with Laszlo, my artist. He's just wanted to do a fan comic together. So we're like, let's do a fan comic. So like, I'm in a Star Wars brain lately. So I'm just loving that. I was like, I'm not going to show you. I have back here like my little black book actually where I used to do sketches and it's but it's like yours is way more advanced than mine. I did like just like 7 or 8 years ago. So it's like
it's weird. I mean, it was a different era. It was like again, it was 1977. I was 11 years old. Do the math later. But I mean, there was no internet. There was no there was like 5 channels of TV, and so we just as kids had so much more time on our hands and were able to focus on these things in a way that kids nowadays are more challenged to do. They've got so many more demands.
Like things bombarding them. Yeah.
I've got an 11-year-old son, and he's it's just a totally different scene. But so this is it's valued in the ones of dollars, but it's got tremendous sentimental significance for me. And
Oh, Prentis, I love that so much. I'm an old teacher. I used to be a teacher, and so I used to love, like, kids drawing and getting into comics, and I still go back and talk to kids about it. And so that just makes me so happy that you kept that, because I tell kids that keep your drawings, keep your work. It's so nice to see later. And you can, like, I mean, I think it would be cool if you nowadays, like, turn some of these classic ideas that you had all those years ago into, like, a comic, like do a mini comic series. I think that would be fun. So Andrew's,
I've had
I'll say
similar
Andrew's.
thoughts. Oh,
Sorry, go ahead. So
I've had thoughts about taking one of these old stories and just using all the same dialogue, and not correcting the spelling, or just giving it like really slick artward.
I think that would be fun. I was like, yeah, Andrew says, you and I need to partner together and do a Star Wars story. Hey, Star Wars 2, here it comes. So we'll write it. So Carl Paolino too, welcome, Carl. It says, for someone who has never created a comic book before, how does one get started? Carl says this. Carl is actually now he's a #1 best-selling comic creator. He just released his comic online and became #1 right off the bat, which was awesome to see. And so for someone who's never created a comic before, Carl is so humble. But I guess I'll throw that to you though, Prentis. How does one get started?
The way I work it nowadays is I basically start with a script. I write the thing out first. That wasn't the way it was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, it was a much more visceral process. I would just start drawing. I had an idea for a scene and would start drawing it, and then work out the dialogue and stuff as I went along. But now, when I launch into a much bigger project, like a graphic novel or something, I always take pains to make sure that I know where the story's going. And that basically means writing out the plot and just writing out all the dialogue and knowing how it ends. Because the worst thing that you want to avoid is sinking, months into doing 100 pages of artwork and then realizing that there is a plot hole in your story that you could drive a Dreadnought class starship through, yes. Or that it doesn't make any sense, or that you don't know how to end it. So yeah, that's step #1 is get your.
You're describing, Prentis, like every writing project I've ever done. Like, yeah. I get to the end, I'm like, I better make a sequel just to make this make any sense.
Yeah. So step 1 is just basically make sure you've got a bulletproof story, a good concept that you're passionate about, that's going to keep your interest for the time involved in creating the art, because it's very labor and time intensive creating the art for a comic. And then doing the art, that's a whole nother ball of wax that there's 100 skills that you're calling on, not least of which is just drawing people and drawing authentic backgrounds. And but that stuff is secondary to visual storytelling. You have to have a sort of filmic sense of how to set up shots, and when to use close-ups and long shots and bird's eye views and all that. So it's
establishment shots. It's all just establishment.
So right, Carl, that's a great question, but it's a long answer. And
so, well, I'll piggyback on that, I guess, because I was curious, like, so you kind of came to work with comics. My understanding, anyway, is that you kind of came right almost at the tail end of the like there was kind of this comic slump. So you kind of had the golden age of comics, and you kind of had this comic slump, and then it kind of has picked up again now. And so you kind of sort of came into that time period. And when things were just starting to make their resurgence. So like what got you personally into comics? I mean, clearly you've been doing it since you were younger. And what was the challenge of kind of getting into the industry just in general?
I was a grad student. I was working on a PhD in philosophy, actually, because there was a stretch of time where I wanted to just be a university teacher. But then I decided halfway through my graduate program that I wanted to make a run at being a comics artist, because I had skill at it, and I don't know, I just wanted to do it really badly. So for a couple of years, I was living in Manhattan and working half-time as a temp, in various offices, just typing and filing, and also I had to take a lot of classes in like figure drawing at the Art Students League just to get my skills up to professional level. And then this is the early '90s. Back then, there was pretty much just one route into the comics industry. You basically went to conventions and showed your portfolio to editors and other artists. You got it critiqued, and you just kept doing that, and eventually you just lucked out. You ran into the right editor at the right time, and you got your first job. And that's kind of how I did it. I mean, my first job was working for a rinky-dink little publisher called Personality Comics. And they were doing like spoofs of DC and Marvel characters. And I did a lot of inking for them for about 6 months. And then I started working for Milestone as a colorist. They hired me initially as a colorist. Milestone Media was this company that was partnered with DC, and they put out these racial characters like Icon, and Hardware was the one that I worked on most, and Blood Syndicate, Static. They were great characters, great properties. And so that was, and so the first credit I got as an inker was on a Milestone book. It was Hardware number 10. And the Milestone books had both the Milestone and the DC bullets on the cover. So I worked like a maniac for Milestone for 3 years.
Yeah. Was that all like physical back then? Because it's like, especially coloring. It was all physical instead of digital. So
yeah. I'm part of the last generation of comics artists who kind of got into the business in the '90s, back when everything was being done the old school way, ink on paper. And it was really glorious. It was, and that, because it was kind of one of the last venues where you could get paid money to sit at home and draw on paper and ink on paper. And that's all changed. I mean, I guess some of it is still being done the old school way, but yeah, it's all shifted over to digital now. And so,
I'm curious to get your perspective then, Prentice. Like, are you happy it's shifted over to digital, or is there part of you that kind of misses the
I resisted it for a while. I mean, I do a lot of my work digitally now. I mean, like here, this I'm something I'm very proud of. This is the Jekyll Island.
The Jackal. Yeah.
Jekyll Island Chronicles Volume 3. This came out in summer of 2021.
Oh, and it's gorgeous too. I was trying to pick and choose what to show of your work, and I wanted to show that one too, but I was like, I only had so much space, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. That was the first graphic novel that I entirely did digitally, and it was a very pleasant experience. It's a totally different drawing experience, but there's a lot of advantages. Namely, you can share files instantaneously. You don't have to rely on FedEx, which sucks anymore anyway. It just cuts out an awful lot of middlemen, and so. But the big disadvantage of digital work is there's no original art. I'm a big fan of having physical originals, just for all kinds of reasons. And when you're working digitally, you don't have that. It's all just data files. That's the main disadvantage.
I'm always drawing like all the physical stuff. I do all the art that no one will ever see in my comics, and I kick it over to Laszlo, and he's the one that makes the magic happen. He's right. Like you. He's like, you guys are the talented ones. I was like, I always make sure I draw it physically first, even though it's like, because I'm like, I should learn digital art, but I'm like, I don't know. I was like, I like having the actual thing to like hang up back here somewhere, just for myself.
But it's, I resisted it for a long time, but now I've just kind of realized that it's a different tool. It's just another tool in your toolbox. It's another way of doing it, and it's got an awful lot of advantages and a few disadvantages. But it's definitely the future. We're going to talk here like dystopia and utopia, right? Because it's like, I find it fascinating. Laszlo's the artist, my business partner, and we work on our comics, right? But lately he's been on a kick of doing using artificial intelligence to augment some of the work. It's like taking some of these things that artificial intelligence does and then drawing from there, and it's like kind of gives you a start place. And like, we're working on it with our video game, because it's like our video game's all about
AI that's gone awry, you know. So we thought it'd be fun to have an AI help make the video game. But it's
Wow.
fascinating because it's like that's kind of where we're going to. It's almost like another digital revolution, but now it's AI. It's like the AI revolution where it's like people are using AI to even write books now. And then like it's kind of janky, and then you have to go through and like fix it. And to me, it
Right.
sounds like more work, but it's like, but it's starting to get there where it's like it's almost like a melding of AI. It's like the digital world.
It's all happening way
hard.
too fast for
I
my
know.
taste.
I can't keep up. I'm like I'm still drawing circles here. So it's just like
Yeah.
I'm not there. So you've worked with like we're going to get into all your works like the furnace because I was just talking about like dystopia, right? It's like we're going
Yeah.
to talk the furnace because I love a good sci-fi dystopia. We're going to talk how to draw comic books, which is what you're here to talk about today because you have that coming up, how to draw sci-fi heroes and villains.
Right.
So but you've worked with some like major like comic producers with like beloved characters like the Green Lantern and Wolverine and Dr. Fate and Batman. I mean, you've kind of worked with them all. And like was there a particular favorite for you of like one of the ones you've worked? I mean, you've worked with like 101 Dalmatians too. And so or what's like so was there a favorite, and like what's the challenge with working with like really like established characters versus like something that's fresh?
You're definitely. I do have a favorite. Yes, I mean I think, you know, just looking back, if I had to pick one, the project that I worked on for the mainstream business that I was most pleased and proud of, excuse me, is DC 1 Million, which was DC's big crossover event in the summer of 1998, and that was it was basically a big JLA. Event. And Val Semix was the penciler, and I was the inker. Grant Morrison was the writer. And that had all the heavy hitter DC characters, Batman, Superman, you know, the whole JLA.
Yeah.
And it was a great story. And that was the one project where I really had to just work real hard to bring my game up to a next level. Because there was just so much pressure to do it well, because it was just a huge thing. And then yeah, so that's the one that I look back on with most fondness. In terms of, yeah, I mean, when you're working, you know, on these big established famous characters like Superman or Batman, yeah, it's you've definitely got this. It's kind of unreal because you just, you know, like sitting there going, wow. I mean, when you're actually got the physical page in front of you and you're working on it, you have this realization that, you know, you're actually contributing to the history of this beloved character. For good or ill. This is now it's a DC comic about Superman. This is now a canonical part of the Superman story. So it's a big kind of mind trip. You know, but you sort of feel, you know, just a sense of responsibility, and you want to be a good steward, I suppose, is the, you know, because you've been entrusted with these characters that are beloved by millions and are very important. So you take it really seriously. But after you kind of get into the flow of it, you know, it's just a job, and you're just doing your best and having fun with it. But
yeah, I imagine it's kind of like the astronauts. Astronauts will talk about what's called the overview effect, where you like see your planet and you're kind of floating out there, and you get this kind of like wow, and you get the kind of feeling of like I should be a steward of this and all this, but then they get kind of focused down on that piece of whatever they're hammering into the space station. I imagine it's a little bit like that, and so what was the big I guess the big challenge though of like working with some of that?
It probably just comes down to like deadlines. That's the word that basically pops in my mind right off. Working, you know, the work itself, you know, it was challenging in the sense that especially if you're like doing inking on paper, that can be a pretty nerve-wracking thing, because if you screw up, that's one of the big differences between working old school and working digitally. If you're working digitally and you screw up, you just have to, push a button to, backspace or back a step. But when you put an ink line on a piece of Bristol board, you're committed. Okay. And if you need to correct it or change it, you're basically breaking out a bottle of Pro white ink. And then you got to put that down and re-ink it. And it's hard to do that. On one occasion, my daughter took a black Sharpie and went to town on a page of, I think it was a Batman page. And so it was, I don't know how many layers of Pro White it took, because Sharpie doesn't go away. I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't behave like India ink. So that's a challenge. Just kind of grappling with the nerve wrack effect of being committed with each and every little line you put down.
I like to think that the reason like Batman looks a certain way is because of young Rollins' random slash across your artwork, right? And so
but let's see what else. Sometimes you would, like, I did an awful lot of work with Dennis Cowan. He was one of the founders of Milestone. He was kind of my mentor. And he had this very loose, I mean, he's a brilliant artist, a very, very, kind of intuitive, visceral artist, a master of anatomy. And but he had this very loose, sketchy, intuitive style. And so he was just like, just putting down. And then it would be my responsibility to bring it all together and turn it into something that's camera ready. And so that was a challenge, but I probably inked about 500 pages of his penciling, and I learned an awful lot and became a much better artist. And then with like DC 1 Million, the artist was Val Semix, who was one of those kind of old school meat and potatoes artists like John Buscema or Ron Lim or John Romita. He was just all, or Gil Kane. I mean, he was just all about solid storytelling, a very understated style. He wasn't a showboat. He was just putting down beautiful pictures, and he just wanted the reader to just flow effortlessly through the story. And so he was an absolute pleasure to ink, because everything was clear as a bell, and I would improve things here and there. So he was like, he and Dennis Cowan were night and day, but both great experiences, and I learned a lot in both cases.
That's kind of nice that you got kind of best of both worlds, and I connect with you there, because I kind of feel bad. I'm the one that makes the big messy thing that poor Laszlo has to find a way to like turn into something that actually might work. And so I'm always trying to think of like, how can I make lessen my style so it's not this blobous thing. But so all right, so let's dive into because you're all about like you do a lot of great like sci-fi. I mean, I love your especially like when looking through your art, I just love your like, especially some of those like landscapes, and like you have all these great, wonderful, dynamic characters, but there's always like something there. And I don't know, I'm a huge fan of like, I used to be an actor, and so I used to be a stage actor. On the stage, it's like the rule is like everything is good up there, because even if you're a background thing, even if you're a bush, you got to be the best bush, because someone is always looking at you in the audience. And that's kind of what my thoughts when it comes to a comic page. Like every bit should be something, because someone's always looking at it. And a lot of your stuff is like sci-fi and like dystopia you love, I know. And so kind of what draws you to that thought of like dystopia and utopia? And I was just thinking earlier, I was like, a dystopia and a utopia really aren't that like different. Like a utopia tries to get everybody something, but it turns everybody into one thing. So it's kind of like an order towards the one, versus like a dystopia is all about one person. Every benefit goes to one person, but like they're like become like the nation almost. And so it's like, it's all about turning everyone into one thing. Both of them are. And so what are your thoughts on sci-fi and dystopia and utopia, and like what drew you to that in the first place?
What drew me to it was I've been a huge science fiction nut all my life, pretty much. I mean, I kind of the thing that made me started drawing comics was seriously was mainly like Star Wars. But even before that, the things that affected me most deeply that I saw like on TV and in movies were movies like Soylent Green and THX 113, right, and Westworld, and so these are the things that, and I just remember when I was a little kid, the first thing I would do on like Sunday morning is I would get the TV guide out of the Washington Post, and I would go through it with a pen, and I would underline every science fiction and horror movie. And if it was possible, I would watch them all that week. So that kind of shaped my whole, mindset about writing and about, And
Yeah.
so,
And then you get to Logan's Run, and then you just give up. I watched Logan's Run, and I was just like, "What is the deal with this movie? It's so weird."
yeah, and it's a great movie.
It's a fascinating thought.
it,
I love the island, and that's almost like a remake of Logan's Run in a way.
it was yeah. But Logan's Run was, I mean, at the time it was the cat's whiskers, but that was 1976. Then in 1977, Star Wars comes along and blows it clean out of the water in terms of special effects and so. But I think if you kind of put yourself back in that 1976 mind frame, it's a pretty good movie. It's got a. But anyway, what in terms of the utopia dystopia thing, that was basically in. I pitched a book to Monticelli Press in 2015, and it was. Here it is.
Did it become The Furnace?
How to draw sci-fi utopias and dystopias. And this came out in 2016. And this is when I was making this book, I was basically just had to zero in on an angle, a way of presenting the material. I wanted to draw a science fiction, how to draw a book, okay? But I wanted it to have some interesting, thoughtful angle that was kind of about science fiction and about different approaches to science fiction. And so I started thinking about just this. It is a curious fact about human psychology that people are optimistic or pessimistic, okay? And they tend to see that the far future is going to be either very, very good or very, very bad. And so, and this tendency, is reflected in movies and novels by the hundreds. And so I just started sort of cataloging them and dividing them into these two groups. And
you ought to make my group, Prentis. I'm like potato mystic. I like to just be a potato that just exists in reality and goes with whichever one. It's
right.
like, so I'm gonna be potato mystic. I'm gonna be right in the middle of that. You can make a sci-fi potato mystic society there.
I'm an optimist and a pessimist. Depending on what time of day you catch me, if it's morning or evening, I kind of just go back and forth all day long, depending on what's happening in the news too. But
yeah, I like to be an optimist when writing my books and creating my books, and then I like to be a pessimist when selling them. So,
but some of my favorite movies are extremely dystopian, and novels like The Road Warrior from 1981. That's a classic action film, but it's a hideously dystopian future, a post-nuclear Holocaust future with this and like Blade Runner, okay, is it's kind of hard to say. Is that a utopian or dystopian? I think it's more dystopian.
Yeah, I would call that dystopian. Any cyberpunk,
Yeah, but it's got some utopian features like androids that are indistinguishable from humans and flying cars and space travel and all the rest.
And Harrison Ford, you can't get more. You can't get more utopian than Harrison Ford.
But so no, I have a deep abiding fascination with science fiction in general, and with this schism between utopian and dystopian pictures of reality in particular.
Well, I love sci-fi, and I love, like, I started with horror, but mine's more like sci-fi horror almost. And it's like, but like and then I went on into sci-fi, and then I went on into comics. But I don't know. It's like, it's such a great medium to really discuss kind of what you were kind of talking about, these dynamics of human psychology, and it's like really fun to show that, like, cross like differences.
The science fiction that I like best is and that most kind of moves me and grabs me, and this is both movies and novels and stuff and comics, is science fiction that is not just about some cool vision of the future, but has got some deep human message that goes beyond science fiction, that speaks directly to people, in their hearts, and that matters. So that's like with
Planet of the Apes.
Well, yeah,
in a way, actually.
Yes, yeah. And Blade Runner. Blade Runner is a fascinating thing because that movie, it's one of the most impressive exercises in world building that's ever been undertaken. Ridley Scott created. It's based on Philip Dick's novel, of course.
Android's
The
Dream of
Dream of
Electric Sheep.
Sheep, right? But he just created this overpowering visual world, okay, with a history. And you know about the world beyond the confines of Earth. You know what's going on in space, and stuck into this overpowering world is this little teeny story that doesn't really affect anybody beyond the confines of the story. It's basically this beaten down, burned out cop who's been given this really awful job of killing 3 or 4 replicants. Okay, and he does it. Okay, and it's just all about what he goes through to do it, and more specifically the psychological and emotional impact it has on him, and the realization that he has that, you know, these guys were more human than anybody was giving them credit for. And that's what speaks to people, and that's why it's a great film, and that's why it always will be, and that's what really grabs people, is this kind of human story that's going on in this giant science fiction scenario.
Let's look at really quick, because I was like kind of talking about that world building almost. Let's take a look here at some of your books, right? I mean, of course, you did like things like Green Lantern. I just wanted to show up some of your covers because or some of your just like general things that you worked on. But like still talking sci-fis and dystopias. The Furnace. Tell us a bit about that, because I was like talking about world building. You're talking about kind of like stories set in a world. Like, just tell us a bit about the Furnace, because I only got to read a bit of it so far. It's like, but it's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a graphic novel that I worked on for like 7 or 8 years, on and off. It was basically a sort of a back burner project.
It's a back burner, pun intended, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Being the Furnace,
no, I mean, it was that in that graphic novel, I kind of tried to also do a lot. I'm really into world building, and so I worked out the world that it's set in 2053 is the present of that story, and it's basically a kind of a physicist, a middle-aged physicist, who is explaining to his daughter his youthful involvement in what turned out to be a crime against humanity. I mean, he basically was involved in a scheme to. It was this idea to basically release supermax prisoners back into society. You know, these sort of solitary confinement prisoners in overcrowded prisons, and the idea was to release them back into society. The only catch was each and every one of them would be followed around by a drone, which rendered them invisible and inaudible. Okay. And the main character of the Furnace was involved in the development of this program. And and what he didn't know at the time was the hideous aftermath, namely the awful deaths of all these prisoners under mysterious circumstances, and the fact that the drones couldn't be deactivated. It's basically a story about a good idea gone wrong, and how it basically backfires and creates this awful havoc in society. But more specifically, you know, in terms of what I was thinking about when I was writing and drawing it and what was most important to me was the emotional story of the guilt that this poor guy experiences as a result, and his efforts to come to grips with it. Yeah, so
I love that's one of my favorite things about like dystopia. You can really examine a really deep issue, and I think some of the best dystopian kind of literature kind of follows exactly what you were talking about. It was a good idea kind of gone awry, because it's like, you know, all of the great dystopias, I think, that are like, say like the Hunger Games. Maybe it's like this interesting thought of like them keeping order and preventing war through only having a few deaths, but what they're doing is morally wrong. So it's like, I love those like really like gut-wrenching moral discussions of like,
Yeah.
all right, this is a good idea. Like, let's get them out of the prison and get them back into society. But at the same time, like,
Yeah.
they're not actually part of it.
That's what science fiction really ought to do, as far as I'm concerned. It's I mean, sure, it's about fantasy worlds and things, alternate realities that don't exist in the far future, etc. But what it's really supposed to do, and what it does at its best, is make people think about the world as it is, and it makes them reflect on what we're doing wrong right now in the real world.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't bash on Logan's Run then, because it did make me get some like bed curtains or like window curtains and start wearing them for like a week, So it made me think, I guess, about fashion. No, so I'm curious for you. So we'll come back to the furnace because I definitely want to. I hope we get enough time because I want to read a bit of the furnace here because it's such a I love like your style of storytelling and that mixture of like the visual. But so coming back here, like sorry, let me see if I can find them. So comics, right? So here's a couple of mine, right? It's like I love world building, but this is a fantasy one. But it's like I'm curious for you, like how do you set up a scene? Like I'm just personally curious because I write and I kind of do a little bit of the layout, and then Laszlo works on that too. But we tend to set up like looking over here. I guess I don't know how well the audience can see it. We have like Laszlo actually does all the lettering and the coloring and the inking. I mean, he does everything. And
Right.
so and I write it, I do the layout, but like he already starts with like. He basically starts with the voice bubbles, and I write and I say like over the shoulder shot of lightning, blah, blah, blah in the background, or like, yeah, this is Fifth Ascendant coming up. This is the Lost Boy. Lost Boy was our earlier one, so we were a little bit more blocky, but I wrote out the scene and I kind of like filled in the bubble. And then like Lazo will take that and he'll kind of do the layout a bit. And then we do the art from there actually. So it's kind of like built from the layout first, and then we kind of work our way up to the art. But I'm curious, like, how does your style? Let me get to how to draw here. A couple of your awesome just art. I love it. And so, how do you how do you go about the art style? Because some of it is your own stories, and some of it's like you're getting a script. So I'm curious, like, what's your approach to building the scene?
What you're looking at right here, these are images from, by the way, from
upcoming book, right?
From my upcoming book, How to Draw Sci-Fi Heroes and Villains, which is coming out in spring of 2023. So these characters were created completely out of whole cloth. I mean, they were basically made specifically for this book, and they don't have any prior existence in anything that in any other comics or anything else. I basically designed these specifically for this book. But like for like the furnace, it's a very much for me a stepwise procedure. First,
let's see if I can get the furnace up here for people to see. There we go.
All these characters, I basically, I design them first. I do meticulous design pages showing them from the front, the side, the back, and in 3/4 rotation. And then I have those design sheets in front of me the entire time that I'm actually doing the pages. I do that just so that to maintain consistency, which is really hard, as I'm sure you and Laszlo know, when you're doing a comic book, whether it's 20 or 40 or 100 pages or whatever, your characters drift. Okay, they start to look different. Kind of
all mine start to look the same. I think actually, I turn him into a dystopia or utopia. They all start to become the same person.
That's another. I mean, that's bound to happen. I mean, most characters look to one extent or another like the person drawing them. I don't know. That's just a fact of human psychology, and also an artifact of the way that people learn to draw, which is sometimes by looking in the mirror. That was certainly.
I consider myself perfection, so I'm actually okay with that. They could all just look like me,
But hey, no, I agree.
Thanks, Prentis. It's all about my ego here.
But what you described was basically, I mean, you kind of described the kind of basic, brass tacks approach. once you've got your characters designed, then, in some cases, if it's a science fiction piece I'm working on and it's a really involved background or setting, I'll design it too independently. I'll make a drawing of it. And that way I've got kind of my reference material, and then I can just start drawing the pages. And then I take the script and I lay out the pages sort of the way you described, just basically rough sketches. Thumbnails. I do thumbnails, which are little tiny, baseball card sized versions of the page. Sometimes I'll do 2 or 3 or 4 of them and that's all just, and what I'm working on there is just getting the basic composition of the page down, how big the panels are, how they're arranged, where the dialogue balloons go. And then once I'm happy with the thumbnail, I'll start drawing the final page at full size, which is, when I'm working on paper, I still do it industry standard size, which is 10 by 15 inches. 10 inches wide and 15 inches tall. That's how big Marvel and DC originals are. And I still work at that size because I've just gotten so comfortable working at that size. So yeah, it's a pretty stepwise procedure. First design your characters and your backgrounds, then do thumbnails. Once you're satisfied with those, start doing the final art.
So then I'm curious from you, like, what's the difference between, like, since you sorry, to come back to your art here from how to draw, but like the doing the rip from, say, like DC or DC, and so you work the script for DC, and what's the difference between working on a script for DC and working on your own script, like say the Furnace or How to Draw here? It's like is there a difference there, or do you have some more freedom, or do you write a script?
There is. I mean, when I'm working on my own material, when I'm like working on one of my own graphic novels, I write the entire script out first. Okay, and it basically looks very much like the script to a movie or TV show. It's just broken down into pages. Page 1, minimal descriptions of action, and then dialogue. And usually I don't break it down into panels at that stage. I do that when I'm doing my thumbnails.
Yeah.
And when you get a script from like DC Comics or Marvel, it's very much the same. Typically, it scans very much like the script to a movie or a TV show, and what you're, as the artist, what you're being called on to do, the specific skill set that you're being asked to use is basically your sort of filmic cinematographer instincts for taking this written script and converting it into sequential visual storytelling. Again, you're basically just deciding where to put the camera, when to use close-ups, when to use low shots. If it's an action sequence, you're basically being called on to draw your characters in the most graceful and dynamic way. And you're being called on to decide the lighting. Where's the light coming from? Is it coming from above, below? And if so, why? Because you're always creating effects with lighting, and with foreshortening. And so you're basically what the comic book writer, has brainstormed, what happens and what everybody's saying, but it's the artist's job to translate that into something compelling visually. And so, if you're, like me, if you're able to write and draw a graphic novel, creating an entire graphic novel, an entire 200-page graphic novel like The Furnace, all by yourself, I've likened it to creating a movie. Only you're the director, the cinematographer, the actor, the costume guy, the special effects guy. You're basically doing everything. And
the key grip. You have to have the key grip, of course.
The key grip, the best boy, all of it. I'm not trying at all to denigrate filmmakers and what they do. I actually don't know anything about filmmaking, about the mechanics of but I've got a sort of basic filmic sense enough to enable me to do a comic. So when I say it's like making a film, I don't mean to say that I know how to make films, and I'm not trying to compare myself to filmmakers. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to give an analogy of sort of what it's like. It's a huge involved undertaking, but it's a joy if you can do it. It's a real joy.
Yeah, well, and it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like, it is kind of fun, like being like everyone, but it's like, yeah, it's like, that's just fascinating to me, like, especially when you have all the skills to do it yourself, because like, I think sometimes part of the fun is the like collaborative process, it's like, because sometimes you gain something, but at the same time, it's like, it's also nice sometimes to be able to like directly translate your own idea, right?
The book again, the book that we're looking at the images for is the sequel to How to Draw Sci-Fi Utopias and Dystopias, and it's all about drawing characters, specifically heroes and villains. So it retains some of the utopian dystopian thing, but that word you just used, collaboration. For this one, I wanted a collaborator. I wanted another voice coming in. And so my wife, Jacqueline Ching, she wrote us. There's basically, with the new book coming out in the spring, there's this, it's the kind of angle of it is, it's this sort of art instruction book, but I created, two entirely novel teams of characters. They're called the Alpha Union and the Omega Legion. The Alpha Union are good guys from a good universe. The Omega Legion are bad guys from a bad parallel universe. And there's 9 characters in each team, and I walk the reader through designing them. But my wife, Jacqueline, cooked up this narrative component. Each character has their own voice, and they talk, and they have a history, and these two teams have a history. So, but I'm delighted that this happened precisely because she brought to it something fresh that I wouldn't have done myself. I didn't want this book to be this entirely solipsistic affair like the other one was. I mean, I'm very pleased and proud of the other one, but I wanted this one to have something coming at it from outside of me that was kind of fresh and different. I'm just getting back to your point about collaboration. There is something, when you're an artist working with another writer, things happen that wouldn't happen otherwise.
So you're either the utopia or the dystopia, and either one's kind of works in writing world, right? It's either all you, or you can also let all these other people in and have collaborative ideas, right?
Yes, collaboration is a beautiful thing.
And you talked about some of these characters too. Sorry, I wanted to show another one of these because I just love showing off your art. It's just really fun. That
is Penumbra. She's one of my favorites. She's basically like Harley Quinn, only crazy and bad. No, she's basically this sort of neglected, demented telepath of the evil team, and her good opposite is a character called Aurora, who is basically an it girl, who shops at Urban Outfitters and is just all about bling and glamour. And this character Penumbra is just this absolutely crazy, psychotic, just mess. And so she was a real pleasure to kind of think up and draw.
Yeah, going again, like Apprentice, you said, like people start to like put themselves in there, or it starts to reflect themselves. So is this a reflection of you when you're working on a comic book?
There's all these characters are coming from some aspect of my subconscious. It's in there somewhere. I mean, you can't avoid it. I mean,
you're the creepy little bear thing.
Yeah. At some level, I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think so here's the video actually. I think
Oh, this is what you're about to
creating.
watch is a little social media just a little promo spot that I cooked up. Anyway, go ahead and play it.
Yeah, I was like, and we're gonna. This is the great experiment. Let's see if the sound works for the first time on my show. So good luck. Fingers crossed here. So
all right, let's find out. Even if it doesn't, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Can you hear it?
I got you. That's all I won't forget. That's a whole lot. I don't go out, not now that you're in. Sometimes we shout. That's no problem. I don't know why sometimes I get.
Okay, well, that's
So I just thought that was just so much fun. I love
that was split ends.
Did it actually show up, or was it skipping? I don't know.
It showed up.
Was
it was skipped, and the sound was kind of chopping in and out. But anyway, thank you for showing it.
Okay.
That's
my experiment. My experiment is it's all part of the fun of it, I guess. That's why we're the least professional talk show on the internet. So, anyways, well, I guess it didn't show up so well. Sorry about that. So, but it's I just thought it was funny because it's like it's got all these it's got just shows that like process. I mean, it's such a process to get one picture in a comic.
Yeah. We're in 20 or 30 years, or we're gonna look back at the frontier days of the internet and communicating in this fashion, and it's going to be a miracle that anything happened at all. It's a wonder that we've gotten this far without the sound breaking down. So.
Yeah. It's gonna look like the old pioneer days when they wrote letters. They're like, how did they communicate? It took months.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is, it's like Carl Paolino was, Carl and I go way back. He and I were. It was in 1994. He was running a special effects workshop in Manhattan, and he recruited me to teach a comics course. And I did, and that was how we first met. And that was 1994. Josh, not only the internet didn't exist, but email didn't exist.
Oh, you didn't. You don't have to tell me. I was born in '86, so I was like, I got like the internet when I was in like middle school or something.
Okay,
so I kind of grew up on the tail end of that.
I was born in '66, so most of my I have very firm memories of the pre-internet world. And it's the weird thing is my generation and yours will be the last to remember that.
Yeah.
But it's been a fascinating watching this kind of science fiction thing happen and being a part of it. But yeah, we are in early days.
Yeah. Well, we will create the museum someday, the museum of buffering after showing the video. Well, I'm sorry the video didn't get to show, but I was like, I love the art. So again, like for everyone that's watching, check out Prentis's books down in the description below. I hope I mentioned that before, but it's like just great books. And then that How to Draw Sci-Fi Heroes and Villains is coming out in the spring, you said. So that's gonna be exciting. I can't wait to dive more into how to draw sci-fi dystopias and utopias. I mean, I love your art, and I wanted to get into the furnace. We were actually just about out of time, Prentis. It always goes right through. And so we're gonna have to. I mean, down the road, I would love to have you back on. We can talk more. We can actually read some of the furnace. But your books are in the description below, and I hope again people check those out if you're interested in Prentis's work or learning how to draw. And but Prentis, how else can we support you? We're actually a very supportive community on Diabolic Trim. So how else can people support you?
You can follow my Instagram at Prentis Rollins. That's the social media that I'm most active on. I post there quite a bit. You can visit my website, www.prentisrollinsart.com. I may be at Comic-Con this summer. I'm very likely going to be at. Hang on, wait for it.
He just started writing a new book.
Contropolis in New Jersey on July 8th and 9th, and that's it's in Secaucus. I'll be there, and possibly at Contropolis in Massachusetts in June, supporting how to draw sci-fi heroes and villains. That's about it. But all I can think of right off.
So, Prentis says, go to every convention. Go to all the conventions. You'll be there. No. So Prentis, it was such a joy. I know the time blows by and I never have enough time. Carl, by the way, says, that was awesome. So
thank you,
Carl, thank you. So again, for those of you who see the beginning, I guess Carl is giving away some signed copies. We're going to do that in about a week or so, and so I'll kind of announce winners in about a week. So Prentis, thank you so much for being on Diabolic Shrimp. All right, Prentis, I'm going to banish you back to the nether realm here. So
okay.
So that was Prentis Rollins. Again, check out his works again down in the description below. Fantastic guy, just wonderful art. Just love just checking out that art and diving in how to draw things. And so how to draw sci-fi utopia, dystopia, how to draw heroes, sci-fi heroes and villains. Definitely check that out. One last word from our highlighted book. Again, Akia, you can check out those highlighted books down in the description below as well. There's a link to them. If you want to support Diabolic Shrimp, this is connected to the website. We're free to join. Buy my books. Percentage of that goes to universally good things like childhood disease research and ocean cleanup, those kinds of things. So definitely check that out as well. Subscribe to that channel. But thank you so much. If you're catching this later, write your comments in the description below. I'll make sure they get on to Prentis. But this has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.